November 26, 2019. Joe here at Simple Life Show. Appreciate everybody for joining me today. Thanksgiving is right around the corner, so hope everybody's getting ready for that. We're going to be talking about Andy Ngo a little bit today, and he's back in the news. If you are not familiar with who Andy Ngo is, of course, he is a type of journalist. I think he's more of an independent. He is I believe he's part of Generation X. I don't think he's a millennial or anything like that, but he's not a completely conservative. I mean, I think he takes a middle road on a lot of stuff. Some could probably label him as a liberal reporter, but that didn't stop a lot of people, part of Antifa, for attacking him. Actually, I think that he actually either got a concussion or he actually cracked his skull. He actually didn't fare too well in that exchange. So if you don't remember it, I'll go ahead and remind you of that.
Antifa in Portland, Oregon, which is probably, I don't know what you think, Daisy, but it seems to be the most woke city in America. They attacked another conservative photojournalist, Andy Ngo, leaving him bleeding and bruised. Police did nothing during this astonishing, violent, animalistic pack attack.
So that was Andy Ngo getting attacked a couple months ago, just for simply writing an article questioning some things. I think that Andy Ngo is actually probably turning a corner on a lot of his ideologies. Maybe hasn't always been that way. Maybe it's just getting more concreted in his mind now that the left and those who are purportedly against fascism are actually walking the same line of a lot of fascist ideologies. And I just don't think that they realize that. I think that this is becoming really mainstream, this complete ignorance of history. And we're not going to be talking about history because Andy Ngo's back in the news. Of course, now he is being suspended on Twitter. I think this was a temporary suspension, but all this had to do with was responding to Chelsea Clinton on Twitter and answering her question. So we'll go to Chelsea Clinton's Twitter here. Now, this was November 20th. Chelsea Clinton writes here, since 2013, more than 150 trans people have been murdered in the U.S., the majority black transgender women. And we have a hashtag TDOR 2019. I'm not exactly sure what that even means. If you're interested, look that up. We remember and honor the lives lost, hold their loved ones in our hearts, and must commit to doing all we can to end this epidemic of violence and hate. So Andy Ngo comes back. Now, we don't actually have his response because he was suspended for it, so we can't really see that. But we do know what he wrote, at least a summary of what he wrote there. So let me see. Andy Ngo committed a hateful content in response to a tweet by former first daughter Chelsea Clinton that said that in 2013 more than 150. Yeah, we just read that. So what he says is that the U.S. is one of the safest countries for trans people. The murder rate for trans victim is actually lower than that for the cis population. He also noted that liberals are being silenced about an important detail, also who is behind the murders, mostly black men. Now, when I looked into this, when I first read this, I was like, oh, okay, so social media is basically whenever you want to point out a fact that's inconvenient for the narrative, then you will get silenced. And we see this over and over. It's going to continue going on. And so I had to really kind of look into this. So I pulled up, the first thing I did was I pulled up how many actually trans people were killed, how they were killed, and who they killed by. That's what I was interested in. So in 2019 we're just taking 2019 because we're almost at the tail end of it. 22 people got shot. Now, the majority, if not all of these, I did read all of them. Some were not, they didn't really say how they died. Now, there was maybe one or two that said, that didn't really say how they died. The other 19, 20 of them, it was fatally by gunshot. Also, very interesting is that there was one guy on here. Well, I say guy because it says here, I believe this one. Let me see. see what was. Anyway, yeah, it says here Jordan Coffer, 22, a trans man. So I guess that's a woman that is a man. Okay, so this is really what I'm trying to what I'm trying to really get across to you is that when they say that someone's transgender and they got shot, they got murdered, we have to ask a couple questions. Number one, is this an actual transsexual? Like the literal definition of a transsexual, they're born with both male and female reproductive organs, right? So when there were studies and there were basically a census, I guess, and it's not so much of a census, but it's a kind of an accounting for how many trans people are actually in the United States. It's really kind of hard to tell because there's two different types of trans. You have people with gender dysmorphia, and then you have people that are literally the scientific definition of transgender. But it's all lumped into one huge bowl. So when I was looking at this, the first thing I was looking at, okay, so yes, they do have a point that the majority are black, quote unquote, women or black trans women. Okay, so I will give them that. It's probably disproportionate, right? But if we go to the homicide and the homicide rates on the Annals of Internal Medicine, that's on annals.org, the comparison of black rates of firearm and non-firearm homicide and suicide in black and non-white Hispanic men. We see here, now this says men, right? So, you know, we're just going to have to go based off that. What they kind of concluded is that black men were 14 times more likely than white men to die from firearm homicide. Now, is that 14 times more than the one or two that were white? I would probably assume so, yeah. So that is kind of debunked, number one. Okay, now you can argue that, we're not really talking about black men here. We're talking about black women, I guess, if you want to say that. That's. I mean, we can make that. You can make that argument. And I will probably just go ahead and concede that because it's really kind of hard to tell because we're talking about trans women here and not so much black men. I don't think there's ever been any real study as far as the homicide rates for specifically trans women. Now, there's a lot of public outcry about this, and that's kind of why we're looking at this. Is this something that's unusual? Is this an actual epidemic? So if we go back to Chelsea Clinton and her tweet here, one of the last words she says is epidemic, right? If we go here on the list of unlawful murders, the United States, it's also listed as an epidemic. In 2019, official American Medical Association called the violence against trans people an epidemic. So is it really an epidemic? So we have to kind of we have to try to understand, is that really what's going on? So I went and I looked at what the murder rate is in the United States. Probably the most recent statistics was around 4.9 per 100,000 inhabitants compared to the average rate globally, which is 6.2. So 4.9 people per 100,000 inhabitants in the United States are dying from murder. All right. And so I had to find out, well, how many actual transgender people, which includes not only the scientific version, I guess I'm using things a little bit, the literal people who are born with two sexes. That was actually 0.6%, and a lot of people are using this number to justify as an epidemic. However, when you look at a lot of these things, a lot of these people are transitioning transgender, which means that they have either gender dysmorphia or they just, they're just transgender. They want to be a man or woman. I don't care. You can do whatever you want to do with your body. I am a libertarian, and I respect your right to make whatever decision you want to do about your body. You can do whatever you want to. It's fine. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, that's fine. I don't really care. So, I mean, I'm going to leave it at that. But so I had to kind of figure out, because one of the things Andy Ngo had said was that the U.S. is one of the safest countries for trans people. The murder rate for trans victims is actually lower than that for the cis population. So we're talking about the cis population here. And with this 4.9 per 100,000 inhabitants, guess what? That includes transgender people too. Remember when I said there wasn't actually a study on the actual rate? We can only know how many people were killed. So guess what? So if we took the trans people out, that would actually even be lower, right, per 100,000 inhabitants. So the trans people are actually included in that number. So I actually had to do a little bit digging around. So if there was a study by the GLAAD, I guess, Institute, and this was in 2017, not 2019. So we have to imagine this was actually a little bit higher. They had estimated 3% of the U.S. population identified as transgender across various age groups, not just people who have two genders, literal genders, people who identified as transgender. So this was back in 2017. The amount of trans people who are actually, I guess, coming out or identifying as trans, it's actually becoming more and more common. Now, back 10 years ago, it wasn't as common. It was something that people just did not want to do for fear of either losing their job, being outed by their by the general society, anything and everything under the sun. I do not agree that trans people should be targeted. I do not agree that trans people should be harassed. I think they should be able to live their lives just like anyone else. I do not agree that trans people or anyone else needs to shove their views down anyone else's throats. That includes people of any kind of religion, including Christians. Okay? I think that if you have certain views and if you're open and willing to talk about it and you have a open and willing audience, then that's a different story. But going around and making, and pushing public policy so everyone has to accept you, that is not what America is all about. No one has to accept you. No one has to like you. They have to respect your rights as an American citizen. Yes, you have a right not to be harassed. You have a right not to be harmed, or either physically or emotionally. You have a right to just not have to deal with any of it. Now, if someone's screaming at you and calling you all kinds of names, guess what? That's legal too. You can just walk away. Now, if they start following you, harassing you, guess what? That's when it becomes illegal. All right? There is a huge difference between that, and I think we really need to get back to like some basic ABC elementary type stuff when it comes to freedom, when it comes to the Constitution, and living in a republic that we live in. So I had to do a little bit of math. So we're going to take this. We're just going to go ahead. We have to assume there's probably more than 3%, but we're just going to go by 2017's figures. And so if we take the population of this country, which is around 327 million people, okay, and we take 3% of that, so that's going to be 0.03. We come up with, actually, hold on for a second. That is not right. Did the wrong thing. 327 million people, and we're going to go times 0.03%. We come up with 9.8 million. 9.8 million people who identify as trans in this country. Okay, so we just have that figure. So when we look at the murder rate, I said that it was 4.2 per 100,000. So we divide it by 100,000, right? Come up with 98.1. So there was 22 murders in 2019. All right, so we are almost at the end of 2019. So divide that by 22. Come up with 4.45. So 4.45 people, trans people, per 100,000 trans people in the United States were murdered in 2019. The murder rate in the U.S. is 4.9. So Andy No is 100% correct. Trans people are actually safer than cisgender people. And that might sound really harsh, but these are just the numbers. These are the best numbers that I could find, and Andy No probably came up to the same conclusion that I did. So we know that that is incorrect. Mathematically, it's incorrect. And we can say without a shadow of a doubt, within the standard deviation, that at least trans people are targeted just as much as anyone else. We also know that blacks are murdered at a higher rate than whites. That is just a fact. That doesn't make me racist by saying that. That is just a fact. In fact, it's either between 10 to 15 times more than white people. Does that figure make me upset? Absolutely it does. I don't believe anybody should be murdered. I'm upset that when anybody gets murdered. I'm upset when there's any kind of violence. I think that we should evolve past this primate type of rage that we have with each other based on why we're, certain differences we have. It's like the old saying goes, if we were all the same, this world would be so boring, wouldn't it? It really would. But this really isn't about my own personal ideologies when it comes to that. I just want to look at the facts and see if they make any sense. So Chelsea Clinton gets a big fat 0 for this. Okay, number one, it's not an epidemic. It is not an epidemic. Now, if the number of trans people who were getting murdered. Now, when I looked at this list of unlawful homicides or murders, however you want to call it, unlawful killings of transgender people, which includes not only people of two actual genders, but people who identify as another gender. When you look at, and if you actually read a lot of this stuff, number one, so a lot of these were committed by people they knew, family members, roommates, and the rest of them. Literally, I read all of them because I really wanted to get an idea, and I researched and I actually Googled a lot of these people, and there was no information on who actually murdered these people. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe I should look at 2018. I don't know. I'm just going by this year's figures. So this is something that is also kind of weird. I don't know where Andy Ngo got the information that it was blacks who were killing, but maybe that was an assumption. I don't think that was right if that was an assumption. I think that he really needs to come with some facts next time if he wants to make a statement like that. If he can back it up with facts, throw a chart out there or whatever, just quote some facts, he'll probably still be suspended, but he'll still look better. So Andy Ngo, I'll give him like 50% on his response because he is correct that there is not an epidemic of killings of transgender people in this country. And transgender people, by math, by probability, are actually safer. So if you have 10 million people, approximately 10 million transgender people in this country, and only 22 are getting killed in a year, that's not too bad, And I'm not trying to say that no one should be killed at all. I'm just saying as far as what the numbers are actually lining up with the actual murder rate in this country. Okay. It should be 0. I think I really wish there would be no murders. But that's a topic of another discussion, and that's also another reason why everyone should be armed. Yeah, transgender or not, whoever you are, if you're a human being, you should be armed out there because it is getting bad. I wish it wasn't, but I am a realist as well, and there is a lot of violence out there, and it's getting bad, and it's getting worse. So as much as I would say, yeah, I really wish I could live in the utopia where no guns existed and everyone just got along, you kind of have to wake up to reality and drink the proverbial coffee and understand that we don't live in a society that has all of our best interest in mind. We don't live next to neighbors who only just wish that you would come over and, borrow sugar. We don't live in that world. I don't think we ever did. And I don't think we ever will, unfortunately. But we have to make the best of what we have. Until next time, this is Joe with Simple Life Show, and have a nice Thanksgiving, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.